What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast today on Monday, October 18th. Hope you all had a phenomenal weekend. We got to see a bunch of wins from all of the Pittsburgh teams. But before we get into today's podcast, I want to let you know and say thank you for making Locked On Pirates your first listen of the day every single day. Of course, Gary Morgan is joining us on his scheduled Monday this week. I wasn't anywhere around the world this week, so I'm actually here this week. We're going to talk about a bunch of CBA stuff. We're going to talk about how minor leaguers finally are all getting housing across the board and why it's very important and how it could even affect the CBA, among a bunch of other topics that we're going to talk about today here on the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am your host, Ethan Smith. Let's get right into it.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And, of course, welcome back, everybody, to the Locked On Pirates podcast. Again, I hope you all are having a phenomenal Monday, getting your week started with a bang. Ethan is in his final 2 weeks of 22-yeardom. I turn 23 in 2 Saturdays' time. I feel for some reason right now that I'm 26. I don't know why, but we're here anyways. And, of course, we are here with Gary Morgan, who's repping the Penguins hat today after, the Penguins beanie. One, because it's finally cold outside. It's 51 degrees in Savannah this morning, so I only imagine for everybody listening here today in Pittsburgh, it's probably cold this morning. Interesting weekend for Pittsburgh sports. But, Gary, how are you doing today?
Doing good. Hard to complain after that weekend, really.
Yeah, I think the only reason I'm tired, though, is because I was like DK Metcalf tried to help everybody. He tried to fumble the ball and say, I don't want to do this overtime crap. And, really, before we even get into the Pirates, by the way, I thought it was hilarious. I really thought we were going to tie that game just because of all the hijinks that came with the coin toss and how they got confused, the fan running on the field, everything that just happened. I was like, we're going to tie in this game, and then they pulled it out anyway. But, of course, the big news in the baseball world yesterday was the fact that minor leaguers across the board now will be given housing, a bunch of other good stuff along with it. Of course, it's not everything that they should be getting given. Sorry, that was a tough sentence, but it's a start. And when the news first broke, what were your immediate thoughts, even though it's something, as we mentioned before we started today, the Pirates were already doing?
Yeah, that was my first thought is how many people that watched this team pretty closely thought the Pirates were doing the same thing as everybody else, and they weren't. The Pirates have been doing the right thing here with the housing for quite some time, so I didn't really think too much of it from a local perspective. And, I've talked to enough of the players that I guess if I felt they were being mistreated by this organization, I probably would have been a little bit of a louder voice. They're doing pretty well in this organization, so I'm not going to complain much. For the league, though, that's a good thing. It really is. And anything they can do to make it a little more appealing to draw young athletes into this sport as opposed to heading to others that are a little bit more lucrative quickly is a good thing.
Yeah, and of course, there's a plethora of other things that can happen with the CBA, which we're going to talk about a lot during this episode today. So don't try to fall asleep on us, guys, because, even me, I'm still learning a lot of this stuff, but Gary is kind of like a wizard with a lot of this stuff. But, again, along with what came with this housing thing, I immediately tweeted, I said, yeah, this is great. It's long overdue. You got to start giving them the salaries too, though. The salaries are just they're still way too low for what it's worth, and that's just where, like I said, for what it's worth with what happened yesterday, it's a good start. They've kind of dinged the wall, and there's a little glimmer of light coming through. Now they just need to keep hitting it and just shine the light all the way through with the minor league system.
Well, the reason that this ties into the CBA is because right before a CBA negotiation like this, you'll see olive branches every once in a while get tossed out. All right.
Mm-hmm.
And really the only side of the fence that can put an olive branch out is the ownership. They're able to do some of these things that don't necessarily require anybody signing off on it from the other side. So they'll do things like this to make sure they're perceived the right way. Like, oh, we heard about this housing problem. Let's go ahead and make sure that we take care of that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the union doesn't exist for the minor league players. So we talk about more pay for them. Okay. You have to think of the money situation in baseball as a giant pie. And the problem with no salary cap is we don't know how big that pie is.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody knows how big that pie is. They'll come out and they'll report what they think that pie is, but we don't really know. They don't have open books. So they could tell the players you're getting 33% of that pie. So if you want to fork off 5% and hand that over to the minor leaguers to give them more pay, we're cool with that. Well, the players don't know what that 33% really should be.
Yeah.
You get what I mean? So that's where the problem really lies. And it's very difficult to run up to Warren Buffett's house and tell him that he has too much money. You don't know what he's spending either. You don't know what he really has. It's just difficult without open books.
Mm-hmm.
Minor leaguers want representation. Everything that you see from Major League Baseball up until then is an effort to keep them from going nuclear.
Yeah, and I mean, realistically, you can't really do any of the stuff like about like how I said, like giving them salaries and stuff. You can't really do that across the board anyway, because everybody doesn't have the same money like on the books, as you said. And even
Mm-hmm.
if they did, I mean, you'd still have to allocate a certain amount, which is like what a lot of those other teams and other sports do with their minor league systems. They allocate a certain amount of money to that minor league system. But you can't do that when the Dodgers have so and so and then the Pirates have so and so, because then, well, why would a minor leaguer want to go to Pittsburgh or instead of the Dodgers, where he could get paid more in LA to be a top prospect than he would here? And it's a really complicated thing, but it's something that needs to be talked about, because again, the housing is great. I'm sure like a lot of other things that will not be talked about as big as that will come with that will probably be much like bigger things, like, oh, they're not going to be eating like cafeteria food all the time like they were a couple years ago. They're actually going to probably be able to, like sleep on a bed that's not like on the floor or stuff like that. Like they might actually be like living human beings this time around. But I think again, like I think we're on the same page and kind of saying the same thing different ways. It's a very big step forward for them. It's just depending on how the CBA works and if they want to bring up anything, there's going to have to be some drastic changes to a lot of the stuff, like I mentioned with the higher salaries. You'd have to change a whole construct of things with the salaries the way they work in baseball.
Yeah, I mean, and individual teams can do different things if they want to. Um, the Pirates spend more in draft and development system than just about anybody in the league. And not that it's meant anything,
Yeah.
it hasn't led to
Yeah.
winning, but they spend a lot of money there already, comparatively. They are feeding their players. They are giving them equipment. They're giving them places to live. So they're relatively taking care of a lot of these things. Sure, it could be better across the board, but it's not something that I feel affects this market all that badly.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess most of the people that watch baseball in Pittsburgh probably don't think about it too much. We don't have guys come up here complain about that stuff.
Nope. And I mean, that's a good thing, obviously, because that means you're doing something right. And you brought up like CBA talk and a bunch of other things and regional stuff, which we'll get to here in a second. But today's episode, of course, is brought to you by DirecTV Stream. I do it all the time. I have my TV, my computer, my phone all on different games. I'm trying to watch everything all at the same time. Well, DirecTV Stream fixes that. DirecTV Stream has all of your favorite shows, movies, live sports, everything that you could need during this football season. Hockey season already starting, basketball starting next week, MLB playoffs still in full swing. MLS soccer, if you're into that, is still a thing. I don't know how the Pittsburgh Riverhounds have done this year. I know they're in the USL. Probably done pretty good. I'm not sure. I don't really keep up with it too much. But if that's your thing, DirecTV Stream probably shows it depending on the package that you buy. DirecTV Stream, of course, is just really good. It's really good for everything that you need. It has a really good interface. I've used it before. It's really, really good for your live sports. It even has a little tab up there where you can say, oh, I want to watch a horror movie or I want to watch sports, all that good stuff. But make sure you go to DirecTV Stream right now and let them know that Ethan Smith of the Locked On Pirates podcast sent you. Of course, data applies and all that good stuff. You know, content varies by package. You have different packages you can buy. You know, you can buy the Pirates package where you get like this much money, and then the Dodgers package where you get this much stuff. So you never know. But speaking of the Dodgers, we're going to go away from CBA talk real quick. What in the world is this playoffs? I don't get, like, these teams pay all this money to these starting pitchers, right?
Yep.
And then they pull them so quickly. And I'm like, so you paid this guy $200 million to see him pitch 4 innings of baseball in the postseason? Like, I don't get it. And for anybody that's not keeping up, if you're not keeping up with the playoffs, the Dodgers have lost by a walk-off twice to the Atlanta Braves, and the Astros gave up 2 grand slams in one game for the first time in postseason history and are tied 1-1 with the Red Sox. What in the world is going on in the playoffs, Gary?
I don't know. The Red Sox really must have enjoyed that Pirate game where they gave up 2 grand slams earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But no, the Red Sox are just a resilient team, relatively young, and I feel like they're just gonna scratch and claw. That series could go 7 pretty easily, I think. The Dodgers and Braves, though, it's really going to be difficult to overcome being down 2-0 to the Braves, because they have the pitching to lock this down if they really buckle down and get through. I don't understand really where baseball has decided pitchers can't go more than X amount of innings at the beginning, and I don't know what that really does to the future market for some of these starting pitchers. I mean, if starting pitchers aren't going to be going 6-7 innings routinely, especially in the playoffs, I'm not sure why anybody would spend $300 million on one.
Yeah, exactly.
So that makes very little sense to me. And as I watch, the Dodgers kind of get tight sphincters and start playing relief pitchers to open games instead of some of their starters that they've been sitting on. I don't know. It seems like overthinking to me, but it also seems like the entire rest of the league is doing it too. So I'm just kind of baffled why this year in particular, unless the COVID tiredness that we saw from the Pirates all year, where they were constantly shuffling pitchers in and out and off the IL and up and down from AAA to here and grabbing guys off the waiver wire. Maybe they weren't so crazy. Maybe they were actually doing what they thought they needed to do to protect the arms. And now that we're into the playoffs, these teams are just doing whatever they can to get the innings in.
Yeah, and I mean, for me too, though, is the thing that, like, I agree with you, is it's like, you were seeing it from the Rays like a lot last year and even this year. And everybody was like, okay, well, that's just their thing. This is like the thing that they do. And then you come into this year, and I even believe in that Red Sox game. I was watching it in the Red Sox game. They win 9-3. They were up 9-0. And I think they still pulled their starting pitcher like super early. I'm like, you're up 9 runs. Save your bullpen. Like, you don't need to like pull this guy. Now, if he starts giving up 4 or 5 runs and they get back in the game, so be it. But then that's what you have the bullpen for. They're more used to going out there and pitching when they're up 3-4 runs or 2 runs, and you actually need to get the outs. If you're up 9 runs, what's the point of like throwing the guy out, like, or like taking the guy out?
Right,
I
you're
mean,
basically making the perfect time to use Luis Oviedo argument, right?
yes.
You should be able to use the lowest person on your totem pole at that point. But I, I don't know. I think back to the playoffs, years and years ago when Randy Johnson was a young pitcher, and I remember him coming out of the bullpen for Seattle. And I remember feeling like that was really weird back then, but it was really weird because it was an outlier back then.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an outlier anymore. Now we've got Zach Greinke coming out of the bullpen. And, I mean, it's crazy. Like to have a starting pitcher with the kind of pedigree and track record that he's had and coming out of the bullpen just because in the 5th inning. I don't understand why you want the playoffs to be the first time a guy does something. That seems a little weird to me. You would think you'd want your best to go up against their best and just have at it. But part of the drama of the playoffs has always been that starter, that guy that could come in and take over a game, and you maybe wanted him to go 2 or 3 times during the series even. Pedro Martinez would do things like that.
Madison Bumgarner in 2014.
Yeah, even Kurt Schilling. Like you want those guys to come out there every other day if they can, right?
Mm-hmm.
It seems like we're minimizing the effect of those players, and I hate to be so cynical as to suggest it's an effort to like cut down their value, but
you start throwing out $300 million contracts, you never know. And I like that. Now that you brought that up, the one guy I thought that had the chance of doing that starting pitcher wise isn't in the playoffs anymore, and it was Logan Webb of San Francisco. I mean, he pitched that first game, 7 2/3, 10 strikeouts, no walks. Even in the game 5, he looked really good. Like, I mean, he looked really solid. They just couldn't win. But I felt that if he would have won that game too, beating the Dodgers twice and then heading into a series against Atlanta, we might have seen him 3 times in an Atlanta series. I really think that. And yeah, it's weird because I mean, you look back too on a lot of the like very good players, and I wouldn't even be shocked at this point just with the way he's pitching this postseason to see Chris Sale eventually come out of the bullpen. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, he only gets 2 innings anyway, so you might as well just figure it out.
At least with Chris Sale though, you can go, oh, he's coming back from Tommy John. Mm-hmm. So you understand why he's not what he was, to a degree. I get it. I guess we're talking more like the White Sox deciding that Giolito could only go 4 innings. That things like that are kind of, I think that's overthinking to a degree. It's reading the stats and it's marrying these stats like to the point where they dictate that the game has to change drastically. You're going to use 6-7 pitchers to get through a game because you're trying to win the inning instead of winning the game. And I don't know. It's changed the feel of the playoffs, a lot, I think. And it's certainly made these games painfully long.
Yep.
But, hey, if that's the way it's going to go, that's probably long-term better for the Pirates, to be honest with you, because maybe they don't need a frontline starting pitcher horse like that. We can quit worrying about that ace word and just worry about accumulating a staff of pitchers that can handle whatever.
I'm for it.
I'm for it, I guess. It's not the baseball I grew up with.
Yeah,
I'd prefer to see traditional starting, but
there's a lot of things I don't know if anybody was doing this when you grew up watching baseball, like with Carlos Correa's little big hit that he had, which I thought was fun. I'm enjoying it. Like at least the NFL and the MLB switched on something, and MLB is actually letting them celebrate and have a good time and stuff. Good Lord, the NFL, I feel like if I just did this to you, they'd give me a taunting penalty. And I for sure thought the Steelers were going to get one last night too. Again, like I keep going back to that game because it's still on my mind because I woke up 30 minutes ago and it's like that was the last thing that I watched. But usually when I need to wake up in the morning, Gary, and I will pull this out for you just because I think they're really cool because they sent them to me yesterday. Today's episode, of course, is brought to you by Built Bar, and it is Halloween season, and they have a paranormal pumpkin flavor puff bar, which I think is awesome. Not like a
Wow.
puff bar, but it's like has like little puff, like it's like marshmallow-ish. But Built Bar, of course, is the best tasting protein bar on the market. They even sent me blueberry muffin yesterday, but usually they have 9 unique flavors that range from cherry barcia, cookies and cream, German chocolate, raspberry, caramel, all that good stuff. And you can try all 9 different flavors in a mix box. It features 18 Built Bars. Of course, they're not just really good, but they're good for you. 130 to 180 calories, 4 to 5 grams of net carbs and net sugar, and best of all, they're all covered in chocolate and they're healthy for you. You can't really go wrong with that at all. Built Bar, of course, is the protein bar of the U.S. track and field team. And when you head to builtbar.com, use that promo code at the bottom of the screen, locked15. Let them know that Ethan and Gary sent you, and you'll get 15% off of your next order for the best protein bars on the market. And sorry for anybody that listens to Locked on MLB. I'm not singing a jingle like Sully does. I will just move on into the rest of my podcast today. Now, the other thing that we wanted to talk about with the CBA, now that if anybody else, if you won't want to hear CBA talk, we're going to try our best to like explain things, even though we don't even really know what's going on. The regional TV thing, I need a breakdown because I kept trying to read it. I kept trying to figure it out. And I was like, I can't figure it out. I was like, I think I got it like to the point where it was like, it'll help regional TV be kind of more like national, I think is the way that I like took it. But what's the best way you could explain it?
Well, the best way I can explain it is that you could always stream games on MLB, but it was subject to blackouts in certain areas.
Yeah.
So let's say you lived in St. Louis, but you're a Cubs fan, right? Well, there might be some regional overlap there where they don't allow you to watch Cub games because of where you are in the region, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or there could be a local TV deal that competes directly with MLB TV, and so it wouldn't allow you to watch it because you're in market for one of the local TV deals, all right? LA is going to run into a few of those things because they overlap with Anaheim and things like that. So there's border cities where like you could only get one and not the other. This seems like it's going to take away a lot of that and kind of end the blackout thing, which is great because yeah, Pirates fans, as you yourself are evidence of, are all over the place, Ethan. So there's a ton of different places where this situation comes up, and for fans of the game that move from location to location, want to keep up with certain teams, it's a good thing. What it does slightly is minimizes the importance of the local TV deal because it's going to have this basic pull. I don't think this goes far enough, but this is going to start setting up a little bit of that nationalized bucket, I think. Mm-hmm. Once you get that nationalized bucket, you start to have a little bit of the framework that needs to be built in order to have a cap one day and in order to have a nationalized revenue stream, as opposed to saying, hey, we're going to steal the money from the Dodgers and the Yankees who got their own TV deals that are great and put that money into a pool and redistribute it. This is starting to lay the foundation for a nationalized base of TV.
Mm-hmm.
That's really the best way I can put it.
And it sounds like it's really good too, just because of the idea that I even know people from Pittsburgh who they don't live in Pittsburgh, but they live west of Pittsburgh, so they're closer to Cleveland. And I've heard that the Pirate games will black out for them, and then they have to watch the Cleveland games, even though they're not even in the state of Ohio. And it's like, it's super weird. And then I know earlier this year, I was talking to the host of Locked on Cubs at the time, Sean Sears, and he said one of the biggest things down there is that I think the Cubs and the White Sox share the same network, and some home games don't get broadcast at all if the other team is like on a certain thing. It was a super complicated thing, but yeah, I think it would also help get a younger crowd in MLB as well, excluding myself, of course. But I mean, you can noticeably tell that a good amount of baseball crowd at the moment is around more of the like age group of 30 to like 45 and beyond, you know? And I think a big reason behind that is just because the games, unless you go, are just so hard to watch sometimes. Like, I mean, like,
Yeah.
what if you're like 30 miles out, but you're getting the game blacked out? Not a lot of people know how to illegally stream games or do all this other stuff like that, but you shouldn't have to do that anyway. And if you have to do that anyway to watch a sport, I guarantee you your son or daughter is not going to want to sit there while you mess around with the Roku trying to get the game on the TV. They're going to want to do something else. It's just how baseball needs to realize that it's going to go. You need to be able to turn the remote on, turn on AT&T Sportsnet and see the Pirates every single day, unless like the Penguins are playing, or even just, you know, like for another example, if somebody living in Anaheim wants to watch the Dodgers, they should be able to watch the Dodgers. That's just how it should be. Not
Yep.
having to be, and it's just like that would, one, it would help the game a lot for getting exposure, and two, it would also give some of these very good announcers exposure too, like the local announcers that just don't get a lot of exposure. I'll go ahead and say disclaimer, I'm not really putting too many people in the Pirates booth there yet. um, just because I don't know. By the way, that's a whole story for another day, Gary, but I don't know what was going on with Greg Brown and Steve Blass this year. Those two looked like they wanted to kill each other all year. And I was like, I don't know what's going on. Y'all need to figure it out.
I know
But,
you mean Bob Walk.
or Bob Walk, yeah, not Steve Blass.
Yeah, Steve Blass never would want to hurt anybody. He's good.
But yeah, Greg Brown and Bob Walk, those two looked like they wanted to rip each other's heads off every single game this year.
Yeah, I'll have to take your word for it. I don't listen to the announcers very often. I usually listen to music while I'm watching baseball. I don't want influenced by what they say when I write and stuff. So
I will probably have to start doing that because that sounds really good. But again, going back to the last topic of today's podcast, I mean, it's just like I said, like you look at the NFL, they have Red Zone. You can watch Red Zone anywhere, from what I know. I don't think it blacks out anything. But even then, they still have blackout restrictions. It still baffles me that the only American sports league that does not have blackout restrictions is the WNBA. It's the only one. You could be right smack dab in the middle of New York City and you don't have to have cable and you can pay for WNBA Live and watch the New York Liberty.
Yeah, they've got other problems though, because I'm a huge sports fan, like across the board, not just baseball. I just found out on Twitter the other day that the women's national championship game happened. I didn't even know that the season was going on. They're poorly promoted. Like, so yeah, I have no idea it even happening.
I've already said this. They need to get away from ESPN. I think like that's like a whole different topic for another day, but I think they need to like go to a different like platform like CBS or Fox where you don't have Monday Night Football getting in the way of a WNBA finals game. You don't have NFL Countdown, NFL Live, NHL this. Like you don't have anything in the way really.
Well, more importantly, they need fans to get mad if they did, and they don't have that yet. So.
Yeah, it's growing though. It's getting there. But we'll see. I have no idea. CBA is going to be fun, guys. I think that's all you can really take from this podcast with me and Gary today is there's going to be a lot of moving parts this year, and I am going to try and decipher them as best as possible as they happen. But of course, if I don't really explain it that great, which I hope I will, because I'll probably read it about 7 times before I do. Gary, where can you find, or where can people find all the stuff that you usually write and maybe put words to mind rather than hearing my voice talk about it for 30 minutes a day?
Everything I write is at InsideTheBucsBasement.com. We've already been touching on things the Pirates should do. We'll probably start talking about the CBA as we get a little bit closer to the end of the season. And then my podcast is Pirates Fan Forum. It's on DK Pittsburgh Sports Podcasting Network. Find that anywhere you find quality podcasts.
Like this one. Yeah, of course, you guys can find me on Twitter at Locked On Pirates. You can also follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan, where you saw me lose my mind last night. The Steelers played for a field goal at the end of overtime. I don't care that Boswell made it. You don't play for field goals in this league because anything can go wrong. I also had a parlay last night, Gary, as we get to the end, that was plus 3,800. And if Najee Harris would have caught a pass from Ben Roethlisberger on the final play of the game, I would have won $400 on a $5 bet last night. But it didn't happen. And it was a lot of moving parts. That was, of course, on betonline.ag. I had Najee's over on rushing yards. I'm giving everybody a good reason to have a good day today. Najee Harris over rushing yards, over receiving yards, 2 touchdowns. He had 1. Ben over 1.5 touchdowns. That's where I missed. Ebron's over receptions, which was 1.5. And then Johnson killed his. I don't even remember what it was. But I was like, wow, this is great. So I get to move into a wonderful week of Locked On Pirates again. We will see you guys tomorrow. I'm sure we're going to have Adam Bittner on the show later this week. But, of course, Gary will be back next week. By then, I think we know who's in the World Series, or is the scheduling really weird to where we don't?
They should be pretty close.
I think we'll have an idea. It'll be like, okay, this team's definitely, it could be game 6, and it's like, yeah, this definitely isn't happening. But either way, you'll see Gary's wonderful face next week. We'll see if the beanie changes next week and see if it gets colder next week. I don't know how much colder it can get, but guys, thank you so much for tuning in today and making Locked On Pirates your first listen of the day. I'm Ethan. That's Gary. Well, that's Gary. There you go. And I'll see you on the flip side.